Howdy, folks. Welcome to the 8:30 live at 9. Now, there are some funny things to talk about because we haven't done this since Friday, but really there's only one thing that matters, and that is Donald Trump's increasing authoritarianism. Now, last Friday, a lot of folks were doing the thing, didn't necessarily tune in, but we had a long talk about what happened in Portland and the tales of by the federal from secret marketers who just went around picking people up. And since then, Donald Trump has said he's planning to expand these unmarked pickups, unwarranted pickups, like literally without warrant, and constitutional violations to Chicago and potentially Newark. And honestly, I tell this story every so often, but Portland has decided to sue the federal government to stop the use of federal troops, and Chicago and New York have threatened the same. But ultimately, the judiciary doesn't have an army. And the army is very clearly, or at least DHS, this is, it's Customs and Border, which is under DHS. They clearly don't have a problem following the president's orders into the realm of unconstitutionality. So I think it's incumbent on each one of us to do everything we can to resist this. So as fun as these lives are, I think I'm going to transition from sitting in front of this fireplace to dedicating myself to at least an hour a day of actual organizing work. And maybe we'll live stream that and people can come by and we can chat or whatever. But I think I'm going to just start doing work because the talks are fun, but things are really getting out of hand now. There was a report in The Guardian today that Donald Trump has checked in with the attorney who authored the legal rationale for the Trump administration's use of torture. And he was checking in with that attorney because he happens to be very good at bending the words of the law and the Constitution to empower the executive. He's a believer in what's known as the unitary theory of the executive, which is to say that if the executive does it, it can't be wrong because the executive is effectively the law. And he was asking this attorney for help to figure out how to circumvent Congress and rule by decree. Now, it should be fairly straightforward that that's not even an option, given our system of government. And yet, when you go and find a legal rationale, it simply sets the stage for arguing that point. And once we go down that path of arguing whether or not we're going to have checks and balances or a democracy, you're already losing the battle. One, because Trump has stacked the federal judiciary with loyalists, but two, because these are not debates that we should be having, nor should they be considered with any real merit. Some work that I'm going to go do passing resolutions in the state committee and trying to put the Democratic Party on record. But really, this is a moment for everybody to take serious stock of what it is they believe and how far they're willing to go to preserve our democratic system of government. If the federal troops do come to New York and they start picking people up, detaining them without due process, searching them without warrant, then we're going to, it's quite difficult. I still believe this. If you see somebody being abducted and there's a large crowd, I would hope that the large crowd would encircle the van and prevent it from driving off, and that the authorities, the proper authorities, would be called. But we need our leaders to stand up and make it clear that the local law enforcement is under orders to intervene in the illegal abduction of any New York City resident. So close. We are so close to dictatorship. When you allow the president, the executive, to detain anybody they want for no stated reason, to send police who cannot be held accountable because nobody knows who they are because they are unmarked, action against cities where people don't support him, then you are walking down an extremely dark path. And I recommend to folks who want to read up on how the Nazis came to power and the parallels here, check out In the Garden of the Beast. I've mentioned it before, but it tells the story of Hitler's rise from the perspective of the ambassador of the United States to Germany. And so much of what Donald Trump has done has made me sit on edge. But this latest move is absolutely terrifying. Dorian says, yo. Hello, Dorian. Do you think the Democratic leaders of Hong Kong should continue their struggle in exile from Canada or the UK now that China can arrest them at will? Hi, Simon. To answer that question, yes, of course. I think people should fight for freedom always. And if they have to do it in exile, they have to do it in exile. Many a government in exile has ultimately been victorious when the totalitarian regime at home collapsed under its own weight. Do I think that they'll be particularly successful in the short term, given the stability of China's ruling class and the very small size of Hong Kong? Not particularly. But is that a reason to stop fighting? Never. If somebody asked me, should Manhattanites or New Yorkers fight a totalitarian federal regime, even if they had to do it from Canada to the United Kingdom, should they do it? I would say absolutely. What can you do from 3,000 miles away? Well, that's another question. Perhaps from Montreal, you could actually mount a decent effort to restore freedom to the United States and New York, but that's an entirely other matter. In any event, we are on the brink of something. Well, I was going to say never seen before. Not seen here, seen in Europe, but not seen for 80 years. And it's up to each and every one of us to stand up to it in a way that Europe failed to do until it was ultimately embroiled in a century-defining war. Now, whether that means that there's going to be violence in this, but I certainly wouldn't rule it out, which is saddening and terrifying. And I wonder where those folks are going to come from. I mean, I would volunteer if I knew where to sign up. There is the New York Guard, but ultimately the states no longer keep militias for the most part. And instead you have a bunch of fake militias running around claiming to be the guardians of liberty in their respective states, but in fact just being right-wing outlets that probably would fight on behalf or alongside the jackbooted stormtroopers. In any event, it's quite a concerning situation to me. I don't care to be alarmist, and I'm not really known for it, but I am truly unnerved by the current state of affairs. the parallels to 1930s and 40s Germany are just so incredibly high. So, that being said, I think I'm going to get back to work. There's a lot that needs to be done between now and November. And if we're going to make sure that we have free and fair elections, everybody needs to do their part. And that includes me. And as much as I like talking, it's time to start doing. So I'm going to go, and we'll check in tomorrow, and I'll probably talk about some of the work that I've been doing and ways that folks can get engaged. And one of the projects I'm going to start working on is creating a central repository for how to engage in the fight for November so that it's easy for people to plug in here in New York. In any event, I got to get started on that because it just occurred to me a few hours ago, and I think it's going to take some effort to do it, but it's time to get started. As I mentioned, I got a Facebook reminder that a couple of weeks ago in 2012, this time last year, I was already canvassing for Barack Obama in Philadelphia. And that's obviously not happening during the pandemic for Joe Biden. So we have our work cut out for us. In any event, I'll see you all tomorrow at 9, and we'll check in on what folks can do to stymie this tyrant in the Oval Office. I'll see you then.